Welcome to the space where reflection meets accountability, where real conversations challenge the way we think, speak, and show up in the world. This is a place for growth, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. So take a breath, slow down for a moment, and let's get into today's reflection. Thanks for joining me for another mind session here on Elevate and Glow. I'm your host, Rosie. I want you to take a moment, settle in, and breathe, guys. Today's reflection is about something we hear all the time but rarely stop to really think about. Ready? The topic is ownership. Not the kind tied to possessions, but the kind tied to who we are as people. Let's get into it. Everybody wants to take ownership. People want to own things. They want cars, houses, watches, clothes. Things they can point to and say, hey, look at me, this is mine. Something tangible, something visible, something they can use to measure success or signal status, right? Hey, look at me, lifestyles of the rich and famous. I want to be like that guy. Social media has created a frenzy of wanting things and status and to be like the next. But the question that doesn't get asked enough is this: who takes ownership of themselves? Who takes ownership of their actions, the words they say, the way they respond when something doesn't go their way? Because that is a much heavier responsibility. It's easy to claim ownership over objects. It's much harder to claim ownership over your behavior, your emotions, and the energy that you bring into a room. Showing up and being accountable requires a level of self-awareness that many people were never taught. And the truth is, emotional intelligence is something that most of us have to learn as adults. Just because someone has lived a long life or has experienced a lot does not automatically make them emotionally mature. Age does not equal awareness. Communication is something that evolves constantly. As life goes on, you encounter new situations and meet new people. Every person carries their own story, their own perspective, their own emotional blueprint. And when those worlds collide, you have to figure out how to communicate in a way that actually works. That takes practice. If you grew up in an environment where emotional support was lacking, where you constantly felt like you had to earn your place, that experience can shape how you communicate later in life. You might be an overgiver. You might overshare. You might over-explain. You might find yourself constantly trying to be heard. Those behaviors don't come from nowhere. Often, they're trauma responses. But the key is learning to recognize them. Awareness creates the opportunity to course correct, to build healthier habits, to learn how to communicate without immediately reacting, even when you feel provoked. And that's definitely not easy. Believe it or not, some people actually thrive in chaos. For some nervous systems, chaos feels familiar. It's what their brain has been conditioned to respond to. So when things are calm, it almost feels uncomfortable. But when you step back and really think about it, it makes sense. Every single one of us has been shaped by our experiences. Our brains, our emotional responses, even our neurotransmitters are influenced by what we've lived through. What makes one person feel safe might make another person feel like they're under attack. Years ago, I interviewed someone who said something that stayed with me. They told me they practice being non-reactive in every situation. And at first, it sounded impossible, maybe even unrealistic. But the more I thought about it, the more I understood the purpose. Practicing non-reaction creates space, a moment to step back, a moment to process what you're hearing, a moment to observe the energy in the room before deciding what you're going to contribute to it. Because every interaction is an exchange of energy. And in many ways, responding to someone is like entering into a contract. In contracts, people take those seriously. They read the details, they consider the consequences. But when it comes to words, people often move carelessly. When you start thinking of communication as a contract, it changes how you speak. Words matter. What you breathe life into has a way of manifesting. How you express yourself becomes how you're perceived. And being too casual can have consequences, especially in environments where people don't know your character yet. Authenticity carries weight, but character doesn't always translate instantly to people who you are meeting for the first time. Sometimes something said casually can be misunderstood, and suddenly a completely different picture is painted. That's why people say first impressions matter. But even then, first impressions aren't the entire story. Human interaction is more like a dance. There's interpretation, there's nuance, there's room for deeper conversations with the right people. There's room for vulnerability, for duality, and for growth. For every person you meet, we'll see a different side of you, depending on the moment, the circumstance, and the relationship you share. But there's one thing you should never compromise: your character. Sometimes you'll be seen in a positive light, and sometimes you'll end up being the villain in someone else's story. And that's okay. In either situation, take ownership. Own the good. Own the mistakes. See what needs to be said and season it with a little wisdom. And stay true to who you are. Because the reality is, none of us are finished products. There's always room to grow. There's room for constructive criticism. There's room to improve. And as long as you're alive, you should be evolving. Mentally, spiritually, and physically. That's the real ownership. Ownership of self. If this message resonated with you, take a moment today to reflect on the way you show up in your own life. Not the things you own, but the responsibility you carry for your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Growth is a lifelong process, and ownership of self is where it begins. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay aware, stay grounded, and keep growing. Elevate and glow.